Hello everyone, my name is Lucy and on behalf of the organisers Oliver Kinross, I'd like to welcome you all to this session as part of Chicago Build Online. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor for today's session, FlowForma. Feel free to submit any questions you have for the speakers throughout the session within the box located on the right of your screen at any time. Without further ado, I'd now like to pass this over to Shay O'Connor, Head of Solutions at FlowForma, who will run us through a short presentation before we enter into the panel discussion. Over to you now, Shay.
Thank you, Lucy. We brought you together today to discuss the imperative nature of process automation being a strategic imperative, adopting effective digital working, etc., in the construction arena. And we've brought a panel of experienced people in this area. And what I would like to do first of all is to get everybody to just introduce themselves to the audience. So Andy Leake, if you'd like to kick off.
Sure, thanks, Shay. So my name is Andy Leake. I'm the Vice President of Technology and Innovation here at Herrick. We're based in St. Louis, and we get the opportunity to work on a variety of technology platforms. So yeah, this is a really great topic to talk about today.
Thanks, Andy. Todd Williams. We have two Todds today, so there may be some confusion, but I'll be calling them by their surnames as well, just to avoid some confusion. Todd Williams.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Shay. My name is Todd Williams. I'm Technology Director with CRB. We have our corporate offices based in Kansas City. We focus on life sciences and food and beverage. Happy to take part in this conversation. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Todd. And Cameron Fox.
Hey, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Cameron Fox. I'm the Director of Process Solutions at Pontum Innovations. We're a company based out of Edmonton, Alberta. That specializes in data analytics and process automation, including some work in the construction space. So look forward to the chat.
Thanks, Cameron. And Todd Finders.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Todd Finders. I'm the CIO at Clayco, a design build construction firm, also based in St. Louis, and working nationwide in a variety of industries, delivering turnkey buildings to our customers. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Todd, and apologies for the mispronunciation. So today, what we're going to be doing is basically it's going to be a conversational day and just getting the inputs from everybody on their experiences based upon specific questions. But just from a background point of view, I know everybody is here and usually for different reasons, but with sort of similar goals. In reality, most people who are hoping to embrace or are starting to embrace transformation from a digital point of view, they start at different points, but always wanted to get to the same goal. So everybody wants that efficiency. Everybody wants that best use out of all their people. Or data would be one of the primary factors in that as well. From an ongoing point of view, is that the normalization of people's data to make sure that everything that is being gathered accurately and consistently. I know there's a lot of devices out there. You've IoT, you've got AI, but you've got a lot of automation from a physical nature as well. But invariably, they are all going to gather information that people can make decent decisions upon. And I guess in the past, and I know all of the guys would have come across this over the years, in the past, we would have had decisions made probably a lot on hunches, experience, etc., but not always data backed. Always nice to have decisions backed up by data and what findings are have been gained from different projects. Again, if everybody had that sort of magic wand, when you have an initiative like automation or digital automation, you kind of want to get up and running quite quickly. we all know that when projects go on, if they go on and on and on, you get a bit of apathy appearing within sponsors and within end users, etc. Now, unfortunately, none of us do have magic wands, but what can sometimes help is when people who have experience in these areas and have, I mean, gone at this automation scenario from different angles, when you gather all the information from their experience, hopefully your ability to adopt can speed up. And adoption is massive if you want to get buy-in from the group, if you want to get buy-in from the organization. We all want to have the data available mobile. We all want to have the data just literally at our fingertips. So how do we get to that point? How do we make it faster to get up and running? That everybody's going to have the information they want, that the information that they've got is accurate. All those nice things. It's not as I say, it's not a magic wand. It can sometimes take a bit of time and a bit of effort. And all of the guys here on the panel today would have come across this in different guises, but effectively all in the same arena. So what I want to do first of all is just kick off with this discussion. And again, it's going to be sort of a question driven. And what I'll do is the format will be basically start off with a question directed at one of the panelists, and then leave it open to the panel to come in with their feedback. So I just want to kick off with Mr. Williams, Todd. Just in regards to process trends in construction, just across the globe, we know that construction organizations are looking to digitize and hopefully rapidly digitize and remove as much manual process and much manual, even physical paper from the organizations. Can you tell us, just to kick it off, what trends you're seeing in this arena?
Sure. Thanks, Shay. When I first saw the question, my mind went to paperless job site, right? But I think everybody on the panel and probably everybody attending the webinar can probably say that they've had some form of digitizing, a workflow or a paper process to make that better. But it goes, to me, it goes beyond that, right? It goes some of the things that you talked about in that former slide, right? The drone usage, the reality capture, right? Those things that you can leverage downstream, virtual acceptance testing that became pretty big during the pandemic, right? Because you couldn't get people on site to do those sort of things.
Yeah.
Internet of Things was on your list, right? It's not the things that were on your list that people will be surprised with. I think it's how you're going to connect those things now that they're in place, right? How do you connect them in the background? How do you get the data out of them to make them useful, to make sound and faster business decisions, right? Logical business decisions. And then downstream, how do you leverage that data to provide that back to your owner or your client, right? There's different software platforms that you can put that data in, and then how do you, get that data back out and put it in your data warehouse, and how do you mine that data for those business decisions, right? Digital twin comes, a big thing there is digital twins at the end of the day, something that you can hand to your clients that they can leverage for the operations and maintenance of that facility that you've captured. You captured all that data in a building information model. If it's accurate, you can hand that back and they can use that downstream. Those are things that we're seeing.
Yeah. Andy, you have, we chatted earlier about this, but you're seeing trends yourself in this area.
Yeah, I think, as Todd was mentioning, a lot of it comes to how you're connecting the data and how you're getting it out there. As I mentioned to you, it really comes down to hearts and minds. People have to trust it. And this, one of the biggest challenges that we face on a daily basis is, the data has to be something they can trust. It has to be reliable, has to be consistent. The moment that it's not, you're going to be, in a chase to try and recapture that as quickly as possible. I don't want to give a false pretense that it's always perfect, because it's not. These systems can be fickle sometimes. The user base can change their mind, which is okay. We learn as we're using the data. And I'm sure the rest of the panel can say, you know, it's once the bar is set to a certain level, it only goes up. It never goes down. So we just want more. We want to have more information at our fingertips, as you mentioned, Shay. And so I think that's a big aspect of this is, as you know, this is still a burgeoning industry where people are still learning, oh, well, if I could connect this data set to this data set, there's this extra little bit of insight I might find. And there might be a deeper insight, and then that opens the tea leaves up for even more investigation. So I think we're still just in our infancy in many ways, and we've got dozens of platforms connected, but I feel like there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned there trust and people's trust in what you're doing. Cameron, have you come across? I mean, I just know from my perspective, a lot of organizations that we would have dealt with, trust is a major factor because you're trying to change the way people operate. So they're kind of going, hey, this is all very well, but is this the right thing to do? But they got to trust you. It's so core to any of the innovations. Is that okay? Yeah, I believe you're doing the right thing. We would find that initial step to be quite difficult, you know, getting people to trust in a new way of doing things. Would you have found that, Andy?
Yeah, I think, you know, kind of just to answer this question the best I can, you know, I think it's critical to get an early win. And the way that you do that is you share an example of something that is, you know, either digitized or automated or whatever, however you want to capture that idea, but showing them very quickly, you used to do this, and this is what the system does now, and this is how you can validate that it's right. And let them get comfortable with that. And that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a 1 hour meeting. It takes, you know, typically a couple of weeks, really, at a minimum. And you know, you're not going to know on some of these things, you're not going to know for maybe a month or two whether or not, one, you got it right, but two, that the reliability is there so that your extended user base really trusts it. And so some of these things, like you're not going to have financial information until you do month end. So it may take a month or 2 or 3 before you can really say, yes, we've got that thing nailed. Let's move on to the next thing. It doesn't mean you stop production on other things, but you have to make sure something's 100%.
Sure. Cameron, you would have taken different clients through that sort of journey.
That's right, yeah. And one of the things that we found that really helps and really works is to get as many people involved in the process from the start as you can. You know, a lot of projects, I think, sometimes feel like they're just being imposed on people from the top, but if you involve them very early in sort of the planning phase as opposed to the rollout, and they can kind of really feel like they have a say in things and get to understand the whole thought process behind things. I find that to be extremely valuable with projects like this and with broader acceptance.
Okay, Mr. Finders, again, just on the same topic, that sort of the trends for construction. I know we kind of let's say skipped on from that, but that everything that you've heard so far, does it align with what you found?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it's a lot of times that trust is a big issue. You've got to win people over, you know, and I think one of the things that maybe has been done that's done a little bit of damage to that credibility is we've in some cases thrown too much technology at our job sites instead of really driving the understanding of the why and the benefits. And so I think a lot of people do feel like they've been imposed upon, that, you know, they feel like the paper used to work just fine. They don't understand the why, and so it just has a lot of built up resistance. And so I think that just slows things down when you have to regain that credibility and get people back on board instead of just driving from the very beginning to get them on board, give them a quick win, like Andy said, and have them as a positive participant instead of a kind of an unwilling participant.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because we would have found with say, organizations, exactly on your point, where they tried to fix an issue by slotting a system on top of it without actually understanding what they wanted to get out of it at the end of it all. And usually those sort of systems were, yeah, shoehorned in, and big beasts in a lot of occasions that were a bit too cumbersome. And again, back to what Andy and Cameron were saying as well, just about that, getting that early win, but involving the end users like at the very start, and trying to get their feedback. We would definitely have found that to be the most effective way of engaging people. Todd Williams, would you have found the same, that engagement?
Yeah, I think what Cameron mentioned, getting active participation from a larger audience is critical, right? I think that's how you gain trust in the system. They feel like they're part of the process, right? And when you go to roll something like that out, you got a larger, adoption base already because they've been part of that process, right? They can spread the goodwill because of that, because you've done the due diligence. It takes a little bit longer, don't get me wrong, because you're involving more people, but at the end of the day, you're saving time on the back end because you've invested that time up front.
Yeah, and that's so crucial. We always find that the first initiative takes the longest, because you're trying to involve people and get them to understand. And your point there, your adjective, active participation, is so crucial. Not just involvement, not just sharing of information. It's active participation where you get feedback, where you get people. I mean, it has to be a collaborative initiative. Great. I don't want to labor the point too much because we have a few areas to cover. And again, here, the common construction challenges and how to face them. I mean, we're going to tip along a few overlaps, but I think it's important for everybody to get as much information as possible. Todd Finders, I just want to ask you the question to kick this off. That this sector, as you know, there's always short timelines, tight budgets. We know that construction, the margins there are always tight because of obviously a lot of competition. So there's tons of challenges for any organization to digitize. How would you advise, I mean, an organization? I know that's a really large question, right? But how would you advise a department or people in job roles? What would be your kickoff point if you came across an organization that wanted to digitize and automate?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest keys that we have found is people that really embrace technology. So sometimes just looking for the willing and the interested department and team, and to use them to try to develop that quick win can do a lot for you. Because everybody will say that, yeah, we know we need to digitize, but do they really have interest in change, and are they really focused on using technology as an advantage? Because that's, I think, the challenge that we face of having so much technology sometimes thrown at the field can be an opportunity, because if you can peel some of that back and actually make a process better, or automate a piece, or take some work off their plate, you can start to make people more accepting to that. And yeah, I mean, we're always up against the timelines, and margins are not huge, so you have to be really smart. But I think that's where, if you can leverage and show people that if we just leverage some things that we already own, or leverage solutions already in place to just improve a process, there's a lot of ways to stretch that budget and make it go much further. And I think specifically, there's specific departments that are really up against it as well. Accounting has a lot of back office work that, as companies grow, the hope is to keep that accounting or other back office spending to a minimum so that you can drive leverage. And so getting with those departments and helping them take on the extra work and get through it faster. But then out in the field too, you know, safety is always stretched thin. So and they're just full of paper forms and things that have to be filled out all the time, giving them some opportunities, quality. You know, there's just a lot of people that if you can couple up the avalanche of paper and other processes that face them with some willing participants, you know, you can put some early wins on the board and start to show people that you're not just throwing more work at them. You're actually going to help them focus more on what they need to focus on and take some work off their plate.
Yeah, yeah, and on that, and I mean, in construction, like if you're talking to the uninitiated, they're just going to see people building things, but there are a lot of functions that surround the ability to have people there on sites and the ability for people to have. So you do have back office, you do have on site. Would you have any sort of thoughts on, not say the importance of front and back, but in order to get everybody on the one page, would you have seen anything in your time that sort of worked for the back office section and worked for sites?
Well, I think it's kind of a two-sided thing, right? So the folks that are in the field are focused on one aspect, and the people that are in the back office are focused on another aspect. And I think what we've tried to do is really focus in on how do we make that experience on either side feel as real time as possible, realizing that people are trying to make active decisions that are based on some form of reality, and a lot of that reality is data driven, and to the degree that it can be. But when you're on the site, job sites are dynamic. They're changing by the second. Trucks and vehicles are moving around the job site. People are coming on and off the site, and literally a building is being constructed in front of you. And so the job site literally changes physically by the day. So I think it's a matter of who needs to have what information and at what time or what cadence, and so how they're getting that to us has been kind of a big focal point. Is how do we create a user experience that is built for the field but also built for the office, whether it's mobile or on a PC or a laptop or whatever, where people can get to information, not have to go to 50 different platforms to get it. So try to create a user experience that's centralized. It's their quote unquote single source of truth or whatever. But I mean, we kind of joke about that now because that whole concept seems a little cliche or markety, but I think the reality is people are busy and they don't have time to log into 15 platforms. So I think the more we can do to centralize the access to the information, it's I kind of account it as like I think, as Tom was talking a second ago around the automation piece and all this, I kind of chalk it up to being like the thermostat in your home, right? So long as it works, everybody's happy. The moment it doesn't work, you're like, what happened to the thermostat? Why isn't it working? Why isn't my room regulated at the temperature that I like? And so you immediately jump out of your chair and you go and try to fix it, right? When things work well, it's silence. It's it's like the weirdest thing. You would think people would be high-fiving in the hallways, but they don't. They only
get no credit for that.
Something wrong.
Yeah, that's so true. Todd Williams, again, those challenges. Yeah, and it's so true. You don't get credit when it's working so sweetly. I mean, everybody knows that from IT, from construction, from everything. Yeah, it has to be swimming along. How would you like those challenges to get the whole team going? Have you come across that as well, getting the guys
Well,
aligned?
I think it's to Andy's and Todd's point, right? It's we're stressing here, if we can connect the job sites with Wi-Fi holistically, right? And regardless of the platform they use, it's almost instant gratification back in the back office, depending on what kind of information that you want, right? So there's a big push internally because we're driving these digital tools, right? And if the job sites isn't connected or it's intermittent connected, well, that sucks, right? I mean, let's be honest, right? You're trying to get your job done, and that sucks because you can't you have to go back to the trailer to get it connect in the sync, and that's not the way this should work, right? You should be able to put the data in and have it should flag somebody on the back end that something's changing, right? There should be an automated process there that if something's drastic enough that you get notified and then you can react to that, right? You're not you don't have to have somebody come to you and say, hey, this isn't working, right? It's part of the data stream that you're getting because you have that connectivity. If you don't have that connectivity, it's awful, right? It sucks to be that person that's on site trying to get their job done because, they could be, a 200,000 square foot facility on the far end of the site and have to walk back to the trailer to get some connectivity or use their phone to call somebody at the trailer to input some data. That's not a happy place.
Yeah, I mean, and the reality is, even though, I mean, systems can work offline for the most part. I mean, I know ours does, but it's that comms part that you're talking about there that's so crucial. So you got that fundamental foundation saying, bottom line is we need to be able to communicate. So no matter what we have, when I do something, it needs to go from here to here to here, So those fundamentals, I mean, again, you ask any teenager, they don't have that as well. It's just that's a foundation really for everything these days.
Exactly. It's like you're connected. If you're in your house, you're fully connected, right? You can do multiple things, right, based upon your internet connection. But you get to your job, and if you're on site, it can suck if you don't have that type of connectivity.
I just want to press on here, guys. Andy, just in the sort of the empowering for digital adoption. Now, we did hit on this at the start that in order to get people involved, you want adoption. Like, I mean, you have to get adoption is the thing when you start it off. And I certainly have found it difficult in some projects where the very first initiative is like trying to roll that tire up the hill. In some cases now when you get it to the top of the hill, the second and third is a lot easier. But that first one, so again, I know that we sort of touched on this, but what would your magic wand be for empowering that digital adoption?
I think Cameron touched on it earlier, and a lot of this comes down to change management, is understanding the complete, all the little wormholes you're going to go down when you start to go down one of these processes. Is one thing to say, we're going to automate project setup. Okay, well, that's great. What does that mean? There are a lot of different stakeholders involved in these things, and until you actually start peeling back the layers of the onion, you have no idea how many people are being affected, how many workflows are being affected, how many systems are being impacted, how much data misalignment you actually have. And that's where, the human aspect of this is able to look at something and go, that data point actually means this in this system, but it means this in this system. And every time I do this, I go and I call this person and let them know what I'm doing. So there's a lot of, the human element that's in the middle of these processes before they get automated. Once you really dig in and you try and figure out how you're going to make that digitization or that automated workflow or that integration through the API or whatever, when you really dig into that, you got to understand all of those things and really put them up on the board, have stakeholders there to understand it. I mean, you'll be surprised how many people are going to learn just from that discussion. They're like, I had no idea that, so-and-so did that on every job. That has to take up a ton of their time, and it does. And that's where I think that's where some of the fun conversations happen, is people start to really get an appreciation for what's going on outside of their part of the world. Their life filter gets changed a little bit, and they're a little bit more open to, well, I wanted it to be this way, but I see why we need to do this. So I think, Cameron's point earlier, you get folks involved, have them be a part of the discussion, have them be a part of the sausage making process. Doing this is not easy. It's not simple. There's no magic wand, Shay. Honestly, it's kind of a messy process, and you don't get it right the first time, or I haven't got it right the first time. I sure try like heck. But I think the more honest you are, the more transparent you are, that yeah, it doesn't work. I'm sorry. We're doing everything we can to figure these things out. Now, that's not to say we haven't had our wins, and we knock stuff out of the park all the time. And when you get those wins in, you're like, all right, what's the next challenge we can go after? But until you've gotten through one or two of those and you start to get an appreciation for what that process needs to look like and who needs to be involved, understanding just that in your ecosystem. We're growing like crazy. We're hiring people constantly. Knowing who's the stakeholder may change a little bit from month to month. And then you're going to get some new expertise that walks in the door that you didn't know about before. And then of course, technology never sits still. I've been, yet to go a week and go, well, nothing new happened. So I think that's really, to answer your question, it really comes down to the change management aspect. And, we're even looking at having kind of a customer success role within our company. We've always had these like tech support, BIM, VDC kind of folks that were always in the wings, but not really a super big focal point. They're becoming more and more critical in not just the automation and all that stuff, but just getting the buy-in and the feedback, because you can't capture everything in a meeting. And you're going to get discussions that happen outside of the office and the job site or whatever, that it's like, oh, it's great, except it doesn't do this one thing which would have made it awesome. Well, hey, let us know. So having these other eyes and ears out in the field or in accounting or whatever department, having them out there and bringing that feedback to the groups that are implementing these things is a tremendous value. And I think it helps people feel like they're heard.
We have come across probably one of the best applications of that. It was actually in a hospital, but there was thousands of users, but basically they had a monthly meeting with the protagonists involved, with the business people, with those that are being affected by all of the processes. And their monthly meeting was about how the process, part one was how the existing ones are working, and then part two was what new things they wanted to put in. And that is a rolling meeting every single month. Not always the same people that came along, but there was a venue and there was a forum for that to kick in. Todd Finders, I don't know, would you see that as I know Andy sort of aligns with that sort of idea. Would you? And it is a different way of structuring people. Because there's not an area that will be there, for the last 20 years. You basically have to create that. Do you think that's an advantage for empowering the adoption?
Yeah, I think so. I think anything you can do to bring people into the process is gonna pay off. And if you can get people that are even resistant to change, to get a couple of their things dealt with, then the people will see that, because the people that are kind of the protagonists out there, they're known. It's not just IT that sees them resisting things. They resist everything in a lot of cases. And so winning them over and pulling them in, like Andy said, you not only can win them over, but they actually do. If you cut through some of the rough edges, they've got valid points on a lot of things, and so they're adding value to really kind of challenging the status quo of why are we digitizing? Because some people just say, yeah, we need to digitize because that's what everybody is saying, but they're actually going to challenge you to really deal with the issue and make sure that the end result really does turn out to advance the corporation forward. Because I think digitizing for the sake of digitizing is not value, but digitizing to improve processes and make things more efficient, deliver better data, those things it's the ultimate value that you're looking for. And so yeah, I think that approach makes a ton of sense, and it takes time too, because we've had to invest a lot of time and energy into that, and you got to keep convincing yourself that it's worth it, right? That this is going to pay off, and so I'm going to keep at it, because it just doesn't happen overnight, for sure.
Back to what Andy was saying, I think that, and from what we said earlier on, that the trust factor, but that honesty and transparency during that process it's a real, hey, we're in this together. It's not a you and us, we're actually in this together. And yeah, I think that's really important. Carmen, I just want to hit you with this question just about the improvement of productivity on site. I know that, again, that you would have been with a lot of different clients even at the same time. And I know, okay, we're going to remove paper, and that's what you like to do. You want to remove paper. It's not just about that, but paper, Excel. And it's funny, we would have some people that think, hey, I'm digitized because I don't have a physical piece of paper. It's in my inbox, it's digital. You go, well, okay, well, that's not what we kind of mean. We mean the sort of the process. But what would your sort of starting point when you started looking at any of your clients, the improvement of productivity and transparency? How would you improve that?
For sure. I mean, I think it kind of it comes in sort of two phases, right? Like there is sort of an initial phase of, like kind of Andy said, of throwing everything up on the board and getting to see how everything fits together. You really start to understand the complexity that you're dealing with, and then the opportunity to sort of start chunking things into pieces, right? Because I think there is sort of that initial phase of just getting organized and understanding what it is that you're up against, because before you even start to automate something, there's actually a lot of benefits that can be drawn just from simple organization, right? Like if you can figure out what your process is and then encourage people to do that consistently, a lot of savings can be, achieved just from that consistent approach alone. You're not having people ask questions like, is this the right, am I supposed to use form version number 32 or 33? I can't quite remember the last email that I saw that in, right? Or, who do I have to email to get that particular purchase order approved for this job or for this amount? If you can organize your process so that those things are extremely clear for people, or even built into the logic of the process so that all they have to do is worry about the task itself, there's a lot of benefits that are achieved from that before you even go down the road of automating, right? Like I really do think it's sort of a digitization has to come before automation approach on the prioritization side of things.
Yeah, it's harking back, and I think it could have been, it could have been Andy said earlier, I can't remember who brought it, but again, it's that the movement of the information is great, all very well, but it's the understanding of what everybody's doing. So the realization of, hey, I didn't know that this went from here to here, that sort of education. I know, Todd Williams, would you have come across, like, when these initiatives start? And I know for sure, I remember one Six Sigma guy saying to me that part of the process, his little underlying goal was to not just digitize, but it was to educate everybody that, hey, it's not just handing up a sheet of paper and all of a sudden things happen, or sending an email or picking up the phone. You got to see, and that education of what actually is involved helped people to understand why things might take a little longer here, or might, Todd, have you come across that evolution of the understanding of the process to be a thing?
Well, I don't know if we've come across it. I think it depends on what their wheelhouse is and what they care about. Like safety might not care about something that quality might be doing or whatever, right? But we're going through the process now of mapping our backend systems and saying how does one system connect to the other, and what should be providing data from one system to the other, right? To make sure that we have them, number one, we have them captured and we know what we have in the environment, and number two, how are they going to connect once we have the data, how we connect them back and forth. To be quite honest, every department within the company probably is at a different, data maturity level, right? Or digital maturity level, however you want to say it. Some may be just in the process of digitizing, and others may be further along. They might be in step 3, right? If that's the case, well, you can't keep the department that's ahead of everybody else and say, well, slow down, that's not part of the game. That's not part of the plan, right? So, but you have to enable the ones that are further behind to, how do you give them a boost to help them catch up to the ones, because the departments that are further behind or that are not functioning as well as the other ones, they become a burden to the rest of the org. So you have to somehow prop them up, right? So how do you do that without being negative or not providing them the right resources they need to prop them up? And part of that comes back to having good requirements gathering to the people on the panel's point. If you don't have good requirements around and other people that are part of that process, they're not going to be able to to have intake and buy-in to those processes.
Yeah, and I think probably as well, like kind of the sharing of success should also come into play there as well, so that the departments that are lagging behind, if you do have that gathering of minds on a regular basis, and again, Andy, is back to what you were saying in the last point, but when you have people together, like if that sharing of information kicks in, you're hoping that probably organically, you don't have to become, negative about it and say, oh, if you only you did this, but by seeing the success in one area, another area can say, could we have a bit of that? I mean, yeah, Andy.
And I think that's exactly what happens is, but when people start to see others have success, what I've learned is no matter how big the win, it can't come from me. Like it brings no value for it to come from me, because I'm too far along in the strategy, implementation realm of it, that it, not that I can't sell it, but it typically will come better from their peer, whoever it is, and from the highest ranks to the lowest, and anywhere else in between. When it comes from a peer, there's an innate trust there that they've tried it, they've tested it, they understand it, and I think that's where you're going to get more success out of that in some ways, because I'm not the one out in the field every day, or I'm not the one in accounting every day. I'm doing a lot of these other support type things to make it all work with a whole team of really smart folks. But at the end of the day, we're not the ones out moving dirt, and the people that are doing that, they want to trust the platform and trust us, and that's how they get that buy-in, is from that shared success. One thing I wanted to touch on with it, Todd Williams mentioned, is when you think about the scope of the effort that you're going after, you really have to think so big. I mean, and I think it's something that, and when I say think big, it's not just thinking about the platforms and the people and the implementation or the change management or whatever. You have to think on behalf of multiple user groups. You have to think with the executive group. You have to bring everybody along. And I don't remember who said it earlier, but when you're bringing folks along, it's not just the end users, it's not just the stakeholders, it's everybody. Everybody's learning. And until everybody's aware of all the complications of these things, they think you just wave your magic wand and boom, it's done the next day. And these things can take months, sometimes longer, sometimes less, but understanding the full aspect of that, I think that's where thinking big, thinking with the entirety of the group, helping them be a part of that process, it takes a lot of energy around that investment.
Sure. Now, here's an area that we're all familiar with. Cameron, I'm going to just start off with you. I mean, I know I'd like to say we've been through a pandemic, but anyway, let's just say we've been through a pandemic. But I mean, organizations, it's more important than ever, the collection of data from all different sources. And we know that those sources can be in different locations. Would you agree that the benefits of, I mean, we all know this, but the benefits far outweigh the sort of the downside of digitizing from a data point of view? So we could spend the whole day just talking about the importance of data, but Cameron, I think it's something that people need to understand as well, because when they do their bits and pieces, they think, well, I've just done my piece of work, I'm happy, I'm done. But no, data is really important in every aspect of what you do, and the more data we have for the activities, the better. Sorry, Cameron, how have you found that? I mean, and how would you impress that on those that you deal with?
Agreed. Yeah, I think a big part of it is what you were saying there about just having people realize that they're in an interconnected system where no one's ever doing a task in a business in isolation that doesn't have sort of follow-on effects or follow-on connections to other people and to other decisions being made. I think that's a really big thing. And so if you can take all of those individual tasks, centralize them, and you have the data on it, it really helps you. I think really comes down to being able to make proactive decisions instead of reactive decisions, right? Like if you're running low on a particular resource, or you're having a large number of units go out of service on site or something like that, there's there's a lot more options available to you if you find that out 3 weeks earlier, as opposed to the point in time when it's now all of a sudden an emergency because nobody had the proper metrics to place to be able to sort of continuously monitor what's going on. And in terms of what you're saying about sort of how the digitization and the data meet, like what we've really found in all the projects that we've done is that it's the process digitization and improvement that really allows you to collect the structured data, but then it's ultimately the analysis of that structured data that further informs the improvements to your processes, right? So you go from at first maybe being able to monitor for issues and be more proactive, but then eventually you're improving your process to the point where hopefully you're having less and less issues as time goes on.
Yeah, and time will, I mean, as time moves on, processes will change and amend. Like something that you did 10 years ago may not be as done the same way today, or shouldn't be. Todd Finders, did you, from your point of view, data, I mean, it's massively important, and the collection of it and the decisions that you make with it.
Yeah, and we've, as you alluded to at the very beginning, you know, I think the pandemic accelerated a lot of things, and what it really drove home was the need to be able to have visibility when you can't go to the job site, or when more of your employees are remote. And so it really just accelerated and highlighted the need for good data. And so we've been really trying to address all angles of that, because you can't analyze data if it's not timely, if it's not good quality, accurate, you know, all those things. So you really got to address the collection side as well, and try to use sensors and IoT to automate as much as you can, but then also just really enhance people's ability to capture data and issues and changes and all the things that happen from moment to moment at the job site. And so we've put our focus on both ends, you know, because you have to invest in data analytics tools and talent and expertise, but you really have to address that up front, or else you're going to be just really analyzing bad data.
Yeah. And again, Todd Williams, Andy was saying, you were saying thinking big. The data part of that is a huge element, isn't it? I mean, not only do you have to think big, it's big about the information that's been gathered.
Right, and you know, to the point about data, it's got to be the right data that you're collecting, and it's got to be accurate, right? If you start with crappy data, well, you know, crap in, crap out, right? That's kind of, you know, everybody knows the saying. If we're tracking people's time, right, and we're not categorizing that time accurately enough, and then somebody wants to come back and track something else against that time, well, I'm starting with bad data to begin with. So anything that you're tracking against that data is going to be bad, right? It's going to look bad, right? Because you don't have accurate stuff. I think the key is to make sure that you're capturing the right data at the right time, and that it's accurate, right? And that the key to that is to make sure that the data that you're receiving is accurate. So you're having people, it's somebody's full-time job to look at the data to make sure that it's the right type of data. It's categorized right. If you don't start with that at the beginning, when you get to the end, it's almost too late, because then you have to revamp, restart over, recategorize things. If you can take that out of an end user's hands and give them drop downs to pick from, things that make it a little bit easier for them to select from, everything can't just be other or an open field, right? It has to be categorized so you can then mine the data and then analyze it at the back end, provide dashboarding, all that stuff. But without that stuff up front, you're behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, and that horrible open text fields that we get people that sometimes people get to fill in, not great. Andy, I mean, so we would always try to endeavor that if any piece of information is being gathered, if it can be categorized in any shape or form, what you're trying to do is minimize that free text, so that everything that you're gathering, even if it is cascading drop downs or something where, you know, because it's this area, then this happens and this, they might put in the free text, but you're trying to minimize that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the little bit of energy you put up front on something like that, you know, and to the degree you can automate that too, with some AI, goes a long way. You know, I think it's one of those things where, you know, you have to be able to maintain the data in the platforms that are doing it. If you make subtle changes to them and all of a sudden you care about an extra, you know, data point, you know, metadata, whatever, that, you know, it's important to know this, but now I also want to know this related to safety or quality or whatever program that, you know, comes into mind. I think that's where it becomes really critical for your data set. And, you know, the owners, you know, the user base also, you know, benefits from some education and understanding the how and the why. As Todd mentioned earlier, the why always comes critically important to why people embrace these things. But having them understand the difference between a data-based approach to certain things versus a file-based approach and what those things mean. It's a simple discussion, but it takes a lot of discussion to get through it. Because, you know, people that don't deal with database every day don't understand why it's so complicated to make a change, and why a file like an Excel file isn't good enough. And so there's a big part of the data aspect of this that's really just the education piece. Like, the Excel file may have all the data in the world, but if you can't find it, it doesn't do you any good.
Or if it's siloed, yeah,
Exactly.
okay, I get it, yeah. Todd Finders, I just want to start with you here on about improving customer experience. I mean, customers' expectations, they change a lot and they increase and they vary, and like trying to keep everybody happy all of the time is not always the easiest thing to do. But do you reckon, I mean, with process automation, are you on the right track to improving customer experience?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge, obviously, and when you deal with more and more sophisticated customers, you know, customers from high-tech industry that have very high expectations. Some of them, the manufacturers of software and databases themselves, right? You're gonna have demands placed on you that they want to know up to the minute where the project is, and they want visibility, and they want reporting, and they want things in the project to construct their building that their customers expect when they deliver their software. And so, you know, I think that's driven a lot of raising of the bar for us on the customer experience standpoint. But even beyond those sets of customers, you know, everybody's part of this digital transformation, and so the ability to deliver solid data and communication from the very beginning, right? You have to incorporate that into your first interviews and your bidding process and everything that's in that upfront to win the job, to gain customers' confidence and have their experience from the very beginning be seamless through the whole process of delivery. And so, you know, we're trying to look at it that way, that we try to have as much data flow from those early stages of a pursuit and show the customer a very consistent view of how we've moved through these major milestones of their project, just to try to make sure that they're having an experience again in their construction project similar to what they would see in other aspects of their business.
Yeah. Cameron, I know you've come across this quite a lot, where different customers expecting different things from the same information. What is your experience with the sort of the automation part, making them sort of get a better feeling, get that warm fuzzy feeling when they get their information quickly?
Yeah, I think in just taking those tasks out of people's hands as well, I think is the big thing. Like, there's a big part of people wanting information rapidly, but sometimes the delay is a human delay, right? And so using automation paired with that data, you know, whether it's, you know, something that's more integration based or or using something like Power BI to tap directly into that database so that all of your reporting is coming through in real time, or the report is automatically sent out via email on a scheduled basis. That sort of combination of putting data at people's fingertips with the tools of automation is crucial.
Yeah, and Todd Williams, that sort of human delay, that human interaction. I mean, we have all the technology in the world, we've got all great devices and so on and so forth, but you digitize your processes, but the ability to keep the customer happy, and you've brought in your process automation, human delay needs to be, I guess, visualized. You need to be able to see that.
Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of the construction management softwares these days allows custom dashboarding based upon what people want to see, right? So, if I'm a PM internally, I want to see certain things, right? But if I'm a client and I want to see different things on my dashboard, right? So they give you the ability to customize that dashboard, that look and feel based upon what you want to see and what's important to you, right? So I think it gives you that ability to do that sort of thing. But if there are going to be like delays from a human standpoint or whatever, you need to have those conversations up front and set those expectations that you're not going to see it instantly, right? Because we're not doing it. The data dump's going to be weekly versus every hour or daily, right? So as long as you're communicating that up front and you're setting that expectation, you can tamp that a little bit, I think.
Okay. So, Andy, I just want to, this is our sort of final topic, but basically we feel that the most successful process automation projects, it's those that are focused on change management, delivering strategic outcomes. And I know that that's an area that you would focus on, is that change management area. But in general, and again, this is a really broad topic, but there are benefits to digitizing. And what do you see as the core benefits?
Well, I think everybody on the board or on this panel's kind of hit on it in many ways. Is it's trying to streamline processes that are repetitive or prone to human error. Just everybody's busy and they're going 100 miles an hour, and it's easy to miskey something. And really, it's not the best use of their time. Like, let the systems do that work so that they can go do the things that humans are great at. So I think the benefits of it come down to people being able to rely on insightful information in more or less real time. You can always move the bar around on what that looks like, but knowing that they're getting good data that they can rely on, they can make a good business decision on, they can make a good team dynamic decision on. The data we're looking at today, I mean, it crosses so many genres, and it has some connection to other systems in so many different ways. And in many ways, you kind of are playing the role of part technologist, part psychologist. And so you're trying to treat the data so that it can support the user base. So I think as people have more trust in these tools and they become more kind of really reliant on them in many ways, as Todd Fender said earlier, the job sites are all over the country. Our teams can't be together all the time. And so for them to be able to communicate, and whether it's database information or a photo from a job camera, I mean, they're able to get on a webinar or web call of some sort, Zoom or Teams or whatever, and they can have a conversation, they can make a decision, and they can do that without having to get on a plane or in a car and drive somewhere. And so there's this whole new realm of, I think part of what the pandemic brought out in a lot of us was it freed us in many ways, which is convoluted, I know, but it freed us from having to be at the office or having to be at the job site. It gave you the flexibility to be in many places at once with many stakeholders at the same time. And so I think that's part of the benefits of digitizing or automating or integrating, is now you're freed to do these other things and make more use of your day doing collective group effort things that may need 4 or 5 stakeholders jump on a call for 15 minutes. The sooner we get away from hour-long Zoom calls, the better, in my opinion, but that's humble on my part. But I think, if you're going to be on a call, make it worth your while. Have an agenda, talk about the data, and move on.
Yeah, and again, that's sort of the different locations that people are in as well. The ability for everybody to be doing, say, the same thing the same way, even if they're in totally different locations, helps everything. I mean, Todd Finders, one thing that we would always say is that we've never come across an organization that has started this and has reversed out of it and said, no, transformation is not for us. We're going back to paper. I mean, I don't know. And I always say this to people as well, that, hey, you know, if you don't do it now, that's up to you. But in 5 years' time, the people who do it now have 5 years worth of data. So you don't have anything.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, the longer you wait, the longer you're delaying the start of your of improving your organization. And like Andy said, you know, that getting out of digital documents to digital data is a huge thing, right? Because just putting something on a PDF and storing it, now that's digital, it pales the value you can get from that in comparison to something that's truly stored in a correct data structure that can then be analyzed and utilized. And yeah, we've started to do some predictive analytic efforts, and we're starting to realize that there's areas where we have waited too long to start collecting true data about portions of our business. And so better late than never, but you know, the sooner you start, the sooner you're going to be able to harvest that value, no doubt.
I always, it's funny, I hark back to that old analogy or the old saying in regards to when is the best time to plant a tree, you know, 10 years ago, but when's the next best time? Today, you know, like, and I think it's the same thing with the digitization. The reality is, if you do it the right way, and Todd Williams, you said it, it's a big job, absolutely, and you have to look at it as far as you can. You have to try and take in as many, all the pieces of information that you can. But the reality is, you got to do something. I mean, you got to tackle it. You got to start eating that elephant one bite at a time. You got to just get stuck into it, get the right people. We talked about it as well, getting the right, Todd Finders, you said, you know, the departments that are more eager to get going. Yeah, let's get going. Let's get pressing ahead. The others, again, Andy, you were saying the others will come along. When you see the positive outcomes from other areas, you're going to get those other departments going, hey, why can't we do that? We find this all of the time when you start the initiative. When somebody sees that positive result, they go, I'd like that. And it moves from there. Guys, thanks so much for the discussion today. I'm going to talk to you. You don't have to engage in this part, but we do have a Q&A, which I hope you hang around for, because we have a lot of questions that have come in already, I know. But I just want to explain to the guys here online why we're actually here, what we do, and basically we're in this whole space. So we're a digital process automation platform that sits in Office 365. But basically, and I'm not going to do a sort of a pitch or anything like that. I'm trying to align with what everybody's been saying so far. FlowForma works like a blanket that sits on top of the existing systems in an environment. And so it keeps the data that you've already have, it reuses all that data. But those cross-departmental processes that everybody, the different systems don't cater for, FlowForma takes care of that. So you're not trying to replace anything. You're actually trying to make all those tedious tasks, all those, I say, cross-departmental jobs, you're trying to automate them. You're trying to make it easier for everybody. We do that through an environment that has workflow forms, workflow, document generation, all in the one place. The big thing for us is the agility. So we need people who are evangelizing about digitizing to be able to change their processes quickly when they get feedback. It leads to better adoption. It leads to support from the organization in what you're trying to do. We have hundreds of customers literally across the globe. From New Zealand over to the west coast of the States. Here's just a small sample of some of the types of processes that will be consistent among a lot of the construction organizations. And some of these can be catered for by different systems, but some of them are not. And some of them are done differently by different organizations. These are all, we don't dictate how you need to create these. We just give you the platform to do it. Our environment is unique in regards to that you can build all these things without the need to code anything. So the whole focus is on the logic of the process as distinct from having to code it. The great thing, the upshot of that is that when you don't have to code something, it means you can do it faster. You get the adoption goes up, and the understanding and the buy-in from everybody increases. You're not trying to, as I say, replace existing systems. What you're doing is filling all of the gaps in the systems that you already have. And everybody has systems. They have HR, they have finance, they've got all sorts of different systems to do on site for human resources, for health and safety. All of those projects then that cross over, you might do something slightly differently to others. FlowForma fills that gap. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to flip over to do a brief run through and just an example of the system. So this would be a sort of a particular, it's like it's a landing page, a default landing page. When your processes are created, you would have links to them and so on. It can look different in different ways. So here's another one, but the tiles lead you into the different processes. Now I'm just going to call up one here just for, again, illustration purposes. Now, you might see here across the top that this is consistent with all of our processes. When you create the process, all of the steps will appear across the top so you can see what's involved in the process. So in this case, this is a materials requisition process. It's not, you don't have to stick to this one, but this would be based upon the information that stakeholders would have given to the creator of the process. So you've got 8 steps, you've got the information within your steps. When you fill in your information, you can then submit it. It goes to the next individual, etc. The big thing for us though is the ability to make these changes very fast if there are changes. So for example, if I close this just for a moment, I'm just going to go into the background and look at that materials requisition process. And just look at the design of it. Now, the only reason why I'm bringing this up is that just to show you that I can make changes really fast because there's no code. If I want to add a new step into this process, so here's the process. You can see it here on the right-hand side. When I click on the different steps, you can see what it's going to look like for the end user. If I wanted to add a new step to the process, I just click add new step. And this is just give you an example. So say, yeah, initial information and click OK. So there's my new step. I'll bring it to the top. And when I click on it, I can see it's already in the process. So I don't have to think about anything else. I just added a step in. It's already in my process. If I want to add information to this, so I might want to see, okay, straight away, where are you? Pick up your location and get your default location. pick up accuracy. I might even want to pick up altitude, which is very handy for in buildings. You can see how high they were up at the time, but it brings in a map where you are. Bring in another question. And we'll say, are you happy to proceed? You say yes or no. I'm going to make that a required field. And I'm going to save that. And again, you see on the right-hand side, the form is building up automatically. Just put in one more thing. It's going to say, why not? Make that a single line of text. Okay. Now, this is just give you an idea from the no code point of view. I mean, the forms have been built without coding, etc. But you may want to put in logic, and all processes need logic. And here in the middle, you have the ability to add rules to the process. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can get, as it's all about managing who gets what, where does it go, who sees what. But then you've got the whole ability to integrate with all your databases, all your data sets, you've communications area. So literally any rule you can think of is all done here in the middle. But here I'm going to keep a simple one. What I'm going to do here, and that why not, is I'm going to make it invisible. So as you can see on the right hand side, I can't see it anymore, but I'm going to put a rule here that'll make it appear. Now, again, I don't want to have to code because there is no coding. So here, doing a hide show question. And the description here is say, title is hide show, why not? I'm going to go into my conditions. Now, my conditions, I can be as, depending on if they're complicated or not, but are you happy to proceed? I'm going to say if that equals, no. Now, I could do a lot more, but I'm not going to at the moment. So I'm just going to keep it simple, simple rule. And what are my actions? So my actions here are going to be that why not? I'm going to show. So if that rule is completed, or if it's adhered to, then this is what happens. I can do more now, which is great because the forms will expand and contract automatically. Again, we try to work off lean principles that you should only ever see what you need to see, which helps everybody on site. But here on this form, if I just try and test out my changes. So now my whole process has changed because it's a new step has been added in. Am I happy to proceed? If I try to submit, it'll tell me, no, you can't do that. This is required. So if I say, yes, I'm happy to proceed, nothing happens. But if I say no, it's going to ask me why not. So simple rules that can be added very easily. And this can be as complex as you want, just showing you a simple way of doing it. And that's through the whole no code element. So what you're doing is basically working off logic as distinct from having to code things. The great thing is that you're going to get feedback from end users straight away as you're creating that process. What it does also is gives you a graphic view. So if there's that new step in there, I can see some of my passback rules, etc., that are coming in through the process. So it automatically changes the graphics or in this description when I change the process, and you always have that graphic to get people to agree to. You can change the look and feel of your forms through our form visual form designer. So I can add columns, I can add different layouts, different colorings, etc. One thing to remember as well with FlowForma is when you create your process, it's automatically rendered for the mobile, so a mobile device. So because we have a mobile app, it saves you a lot of time, a lot of effort by allowing you to publish those processes automatically to mobile, and you can actually have them looking differently, if you wish, than the browser version. You also have the ability to add security. Another big thing here is CX, and you can actually include third parties in your processes. you literally decide which step is for, or steps are for third parties. We use Auth0 to validate credentials. So they can have credentials, but they can be outside of your AD or your Office 365 environment. So you don't have to create users there. It's just all managed in FlowForma, and again through Auth0. One thing to also remember, I'm just going to lose those changes, but also throughout the processes, you're going to get, you have the ability to track performance as well. So we would have a built-in audit for performance on any of these processes. So as you move through it, it tracks who has done what when, and you can report on that and include it in your dashboards and all that nice gathering of the data that gives the better decisions. So that's just a brief, and again, not to labor any points with you or to bring it through the system too much. The reality is, when you're dealing with a no-code environment like FlowForma, you can actually take the heat off your IT people and give control to some of your business where they can create their own processes, link up the systems, etc. But we have different environments that allow you to have sandboxes. You can have UAT, you can progress those processes through and get them promoted before it goes live. So it can still be managed by IT, but people can submit their ideas, people can submit their initiatives, and hopefully get the whole organization, get them into a better place by speeding up that digitization and that transformation within the organization, because you're actually allowing people who know the process to create their own. So I won't go on anymore here. I'll just go back to my screen. So I might pass back to, if the guys are there, I might. Hey, Mr. Finders. We do have a few questions here. How do you sell the downstream savings as ROI versus the short-term unutilized or training or development time in adapting new workflows? So basically fighting against billable hours. So I guess that, if I'm going to paraphrase that, it's trying to get people to buy into the fact that doing this is the right thing to do, and selling the downstream savings as ROI versus short-term unutilized or training or development time. So yeah, I guess it's what's the best way to sell the results of digitization to the organization? Cameron, do you want to kick off there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I used to work in a sort of billable hours environment as an accountant. I think like one of the biggest things is just to not punish people for the time they're spending on these new initiatives, right? Like if you want to encourage something, you want to, reward that behavior as opposed to punish it. That's what comes to my mind when I first hear that.
Okay.
And I guess to make it an even playing field as well, so that everyone in the organization is treated the same, whether they're attending or not.
Andy, I guess it's that thing again. It's that convincing of people that the trust, area where what we're doing is the right thing. How do you convince them that at the start, how do you convince them that this is going to be the right thing? What were you going to say to them? But I mean, I kind of get this now, where saying they're fighting against billable hours. So basically that's, if we take a shorter time to do things, I can't bill as much.
Yeah, I think this again comes back to thinking big, understanding, what are the long-term effects of doing these types of projects. it's not an individual sport to begin with. So, innovation comes by bringing together stakeholders with kind of a universal goal or a North Star. So I think part of selling the ROI is painting a picture of what could be. And it may not turn out exactly the way you paint it. Hopefully it's even better, but you have to paint a certain amount of optimism that if we do these things, we connect these systems or automate these workflows, that in the end, that's going to save you X amount of hours or X amount of clicks or phone calls or disruption that, is going to be offset in a relatively short amount of time. And these projects typically can go pretty quick, especially with a low code type solution. You're going to be able to figure out what do you need to connect, what workflow do you need to put in place. And I think that most people, when they realize, I'm careful not to say it's going to make their life easier. I'm really focused on what makes it better, what makes the business better, what makes the workflow better, what makes their day better. It may take a little more work to get these things put together, but I think in the end of it, they have to see what's the better outcome on the end. And sometimes those things take time. They're not always quick hits. So,
yeah. Todd Finders, would you find? I presume you'll align with the guys, but I mean that sort of, there is, let's say a downside, but there is a result in making things be done more efficiently and so on, is that some places may like going slower. How are you going to convince them that this is, as you say, in the long term, this is the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think it's all about value, right? Because, again, we talked about the customer experience earlier, and no matter who you're talking about, that just justifying activity for the sake of activity is going to catch up with you at some point eventually. And lean concepts and really just having an effective organization, it really has to drive you to doing things in a better way, in a more efficient way. And so I think I don't see it as such a hard sell, because people generally don't like the grind of detail work or inefficient work, and so convincing people on that aspect to look at the big picture and look at at value activity versus just activity as the way that we're going to be successful as an organization is just something you've got to show people. And I think it doesn't take people long to get with that picture.
Yeah. Todd Williams, that old way of sort of thinking, again, where whether activity for activity's sake, as Todd Finders was saying, that will catch up with you. That if you're going to evolve, you just have to put that mentality behind. And how do you get people to put that mentality behind them?
Well, sometimes it's not about an individual, right? It's about a group of people or a project, or the company as a whole moving forward, right? And I think if you have that holistic vision and people buy into that vision, right, I think that's where you kind of sell that, right? You get people on the same page early. But having those conversations with those holdout people, right? Maybe it's one-on-one conversations, right? You make it more personal, right? It's when you have a conflict with somebody on site or in the office, sometimes it's better to take it off site, go have lunch or go have breakfast and talk through those things, right? Sometimes it's granular. You're going to have to get down to the granular level to make it palatable for those people that are, I'll call them resistors.
I have another question here, which is actually rather an interesting one. Do early wins get more difficult when they disrupt the status quo? Cameron.
I think certainly they can at times, but I think there are sort of strategies that you can use to help make those early wins more straightforward. Just because something is high value doesn't necessarily means it has to be the most technically complex solution, right? Like if you break it down and understand what it is that you're actually going for, Sometimes you actually find that some of the highest value, things that you do are actually the most simple solutions. And if it is complex, break it down. Maybe your early win is just doing one piece of that complex process rather than trying to dive in and accomplish the entire thing. And I think the last thing I would say to help sort of reduce that level of difficulty is to always have a go live plan in place, particularly early on, right? Like, are you going to start with just one project? Are you going to start with one team or one department as you roll something out? Are you going to do it in parallel for a while with your existing processes, or are you just going to cut and go on from there, right? A little bit of upfront planning can make a huge difference in reducing that difficulty.
Yeah, and it's funny. It also, I think, harks back, Andy, to something you said earlier on. When things are going swimmingly well, no one says a word. Like, it's just that's the way it is. So the early wins, as they kick in, it's like, yeah, so what? It's it's an early win. Yeah, what's the next one? Or when the next one comes in, because you've had that big wow moment, last month or the month before. I guess they do become more difficult, those wins, because people just start getting used to it. But disrupting the status quo, I don't know. I think it's. I mean, what's your feeling on it? That sort of celebration of those early wins, disrupting status quo potentially.
I think Cameron nailed it pretty well. I think, like I said earlier, once you set the bar at a certain place, it just continues to go. But I think with that comes some momentum. It comes some, a certain expectation that, well, we did this, we should be able to do the next thing, and the next thing may be more complex, or it may not be. The other part is, as people start to hear about some of those wins, they go, well, I do this thing that I don't really enjoy doing every day, and it takes me more time than I think it should. What if we automated that? And, we hear about things some days that I didn't even know were a process that could be automated or needed to be. And you find out how much time people spend on it. And it can be as simple as being able to automate running reports or getting rid of a report and move into a dashboard. Sometimes the way that people have come accustomed to getting information is just the result of the technology that was around them, and that's no longer the case. So maybe there's a better way for us to get information to people, and I think that's where you start to get some really interesting discussion.
Todd Williams, another question here is, how can I get company buy-in from other stakeholders? So I guess it's that the evangelizing route, but how do you get company buy-in from others?
Well, I think you have to start with your requirements in mind, right? And then pull in other people that those requirements are going to affect, right? So at a high level, you have to take in, goes back to Cameron's point, the more people you have in the process, the more people that are going to be involved, right? And you're going to get the stakeholder buy-in, right? Because even if you don't have, the high level people maybe in a certain department involved in that process, those people in that department talk, right? They know what's coming. They know what's happening, right? And they may pick up the phone and give you a ring and say, hey, I want to be part of that process, right? That's how it kind of happens organically on the back end. But you have to get leadership buy-in at the start to make sure they're comfortable with if there's risk involved, they have to be involved, right? And then, hey, it's not going to be a slow or a quick thing. This is a pretty large effort, right? And they need to be part of that process. And these are the people that were going to be involved in that process. But I think that's kind of how you get those stakeholders involved, even the ones that might not be active participants. There's processes and workflows in place that are going to be affected downstream by this new thing. You have to be cognizant of those things. So bringing them up front and making them have people talk about them is where you're going to get that buy-in downstream.
And it's that honesty and transparency that helps all that. Todd Finders, how would you get buy-in from stakeholders?
Well, I think, if you're focused on solving their problems and the problems that are the biggest on their list, then you get them engaged and you get them that it's not about me achieving some digitization goal. It's about moving the company forward and solving their problems. And I think when you do that, you start to get a different level of engagement and listening. And you just have to make it, again, about them and show them what's in it for them. And then you start to get that buy-in when you do that enough times.
Okay, guys, I just want to thank you all sincerely for your inputs today. It was a good conversation and a lot of good information there. Thanks, guys.